Welcome to the Rotowire DFS podcast brought to you by FanDuel.com, the leader in one-day fantasy sports. I'm your host, Josh Hayes, joined as always by Benny Ricciardi as we break down the Thursday NBA DFS slate. You can find Benny on Twitter at BennyR11 and over at RotoCurve, Rotowire, and then it's featured right on the DraftKings playbook. And you can also follow me on Twitter at JoshHayesFS. The Rotowire DFS podcast is available currently on YouTube and live streaming on Google+. Quick disclaimer, those of you who've been tuning into the Rotowire DFS podcast, talking about your, talking to yourself on Stitcher, or you're talking to your phone, you're like, dude, where's my show? All right. We've been uploading the podcast. We are currently in the process of a server move. So these shows might be a little bit delayed in hitting the server in the podcast format. The good news is the show is going to continue to keep rolling, and we're going to make those available through the Google Plus live stream and in the YouTube format. So you can download and the show from YouTube if you still want to listen in audio format, or stream it in that fashion on the YouTube app as well. So we're still going to have the content available to you in some way, in some form, in some capacity. Appreciate your patience out there. In the meantime, subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Press that little red subscribe button. We've been adding subscribers each and every day, each and every show. We definitely appreciate all the love and support on that front. Benicio, welcome to another loaded Thursday NBA slate.
Yeah, only 4 games on tap here. I think there's going to be 2 that kind of stand out above the other 2 as games that everyone's going to want a lot of exposure to. So, it's going to be a lot of overlap on this one. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of the small slates all the time. I'm more a cash game player. I like the bigger slates. I think it gives me a better chance to, get in there and gives me a better edge. But I'm still going to be playing probably mostly GPPs on this night. So hopefully I hit one.
All right, fair enough. And now, without further ado, we will pull the curtain back on this Thursday slate and talk about what you want to do at the point guard position here for Thursday.
Yeah, I think we start the conversation again as, we've been lucky the last couple weeks. We get to see another Oklahoma City and Golden State Warrior game go up. So, the last time these 2 teams played and the first time these 2 teams played, you got big games out of Russ and Steph Curry. I think Steph Curry sat out last night so that he would be good to play here. So I'm not worried about him missing this game really. And, again, both of these guys are in play. You can make a case for either one of them up top. It's probably going to be one of the higher scoring games on the slate. I also think the Sacramento-Dallas game will be. That's the other one that I was talking about to have exposure to. So for me, I think you got to look at the guys that are in those 2 games. So Russell Westbrook's in play, obviously. Steph Curry's in play, obviously. I'm not going to make a case for one guy over the other. It's a personal preference. Do you prefer the guy that's, likely to get you the triple-double, or the guy that's likely to hit 10 3-pointers and, score 40 real-life points, on his way to 50 or 60 fantasy points? So for me, you can pay up for either one of them. I usually tend to lean towards Russ. So I'll probably take Russ over Steph, but I'm not going to argue it with anybody who goes the other way. I think Rondo is another solid option going up in that game against Dallas. So those would be the 3 guys who I'm really looking at. If I wanted to come down a little bit from there, the only other guy that I think I might have some exposure to on this slate, Goran Dragic is still somewhat cheap, depending on what site you're looking at. And he's been putting up some pretty good numbers lately, especially with Bosh out. They need some other guys to step up and score. So he'd really probably be the only other guy I'm looking at here. So for me, it's Russ and Steph, one of those 2, and then probably either Rondo or Dragic, depending on who I can afford, because there's some other studs at some other positions that we might want exposure to as well.
All right, so for me, I think you can actually make a definitive case between Curry and Westbrook, and I've been a Westbrook guy pretty much all season long, and I finally converted over to the Curry camp for the last matchup on Saturday, and I'll give you the information why. Okay, Russell Westbrook has been hovering in that high 40s to 50 range there with occasional 60-point upside. Which is, obviously elite. The price is 11K on FanDuel, and Steph Curry, bumped up to 11.2 on Tuesday before he got scratched. So what we're looking at here is, like a string of 50-point games. And when we're talking about 50-point games, you have Russell Westbrook in this matchup who does score 50 points against Golden State and 57 against Sac. So prior to that matchup, Russell Westbrook had scored 50 points in 4 of the last 9 games. So make that 6 out of the last 11. If we round up Steph Curry, he's actually into the 60-point mark in that pass game there as well. And, taking that game into account, we're talking about 68 points per game. So we're having somebody who's, hovering in the mid to high 50s in Russell Westbrook. And then we have somebody else averaging 68 points per game over the past 10 games. That's 58 points per game over the past 10 games. That's pretty crazy overall. So there's just another level that Steph Curry has gone to, and when the salaries are this close, I think I'm because of as hot as Curry has been, and we're talking about 42, 51, and 46 fantasy points. Real life points in the past 3 games with 28 threes made in the past 3 games. That's the difference maker for me. So it is close, and you can make a case for either one, but I think you have to give Curry the edge right now as it stands, because he's just a hair above Russ in terms of overall top level production. So that's how that breaking down. I'm fine with Rondo for GPPs there as well. I think this is actually a case where you can make a special exception and take a look at Goran Dragic. In a revenge format against his Phoenix Suns. I believe they played at least once before, but actually has picked up the production there as well. 39 fantasy points in that big matchup with a nice double, 17 and 11 against Chicago, and the price is very reasonable, 6,300 on FanDuel. And then below that, for my floor, I'm going to draw the line once again at Darren Collison. Still getting pretty consistent minutes overall. I mean, not crazy about what he did against Oklahoma City, but prior to that, he's been hanging around in the 5 to 6x range with production and playing 31 minutes or more in 6 straight games. So getting shooting guard minutes basically, while getting some of that coming against second team defense when he comes in and late in the first quarter or early second quarter for Rajon Rondo. So I think I like those production numbers pretty well overall. Anybody else in Value Town that you want to recommend before we get over to the 2?
No, I think you got to spend up a little today. I don't, as of now, unless we get some injury news or something, I don't really see a ton of cheap guys that I want to have exposure to. So I'm probably going to be paying up a little bit more towards the mid to the high range here.
Yeah, me as well. There's just so many elite options that I'm going to be up top, and I'm fine balancing salary all the way down to Darren Collison if that's the route that you want to go to. And by the way, Steph Curry, I think, has been announced as expected to play on Thursday. So keep that information in mind for those people who thought that Livingston may become viable. More than likely not. All right, let's go ahead and talk about who is viable at the shooting guard position here for Thursday.
Yeah, the one guy that I'd pay up for, I mean, there's really only 2 guys that you can pay up for. It's either Dwayne Wade or Klay Thompson. I think if I'm paying up for one or the other, it's probably going to be Klay. Put up 40 points last time they played against Oklahoma City. He's going to see his full allotment of minutes or towards the ceiling amount of minutes in this game. He's been putting up around like 35, 40 fantasy points. You're getting him at about 7K. So if I'm paying up for anybody here, it's probably going to be Klay. But there are a couple options, in that like 4,500 to 500 to 5,500 range that I think are viable. And if you're going to pay up at point guard, I'd be perfectly fine taking 2 of these guys and rolling them out there. Eric Gordon at $5,000 is still pretty cheap. It's a tough matchup against the San Antonio Spurs for him, but I do think he can give you a 25-point floor and give you upside into the 30s. So he's somebody I'm going to have in a lot of rosters. I also like Joe Johnson at 5,400. He's going up against Phoenix, so it's a good matchup. Johnson's been playing big minutes since he's come over and signed with the Heat. I think he can get you 30 fantasy points as well, so that would give you like 5.5x on his salary. I'm going to have on a lot of rosters. Then a cheaper guy who's been going fine, I think his last 5 games, including 7x in his last game, Wes Matthews for the Dallas Mavericks. And he's got a really good matchup going up against Sacramento. Shooting guards against Sacramento has been pretty much a cheat code for us all year long. So if he stays down in that $4,300 price range, I think Wes Matthews is going to be very highly owned by people who are trying to fit in a Steph Curry and or Russell Westbrook at the point guard spot.
Yeah, I like that call overall as well. I did the same thing with Danny Green against Sacramento last week, and I expect similar results in production from Wes Matthews, which is why you see like the production, tick up against him. And even if this was just like a regular run of the mill matchup, take a look at the price tag payoff on Wes Matthews here, and because the price has fallen so far below this, what are we at like within 800 of minimum salary right now? We're talking about 6.7, 5.3, 5.8, 5.1, and 7.9 times value in the big, 34-point game against the Orlando Magic on March 1st. So definitely should get some exposure to him. Get it while the getting is good. Another guy that I want to take a look at too here is Joe Johnson, who comes up with his, his first big game playing major minutes with a major role for the Miami Heat, and came up with 24 and 5 with 4 assists for 36 fantasy points and 6.6x. So somebody else you should could potentially look to getting some exposure to as well. Now, the last guy I want to ask you about, who probably isn't in the mix for today, but maybe needs to be on the radar because he came back with a ridiculous first game, is Eric Gordon, who goes for 31 and 3 for 40 fantasy points against the Minnesota Timberwolves. A, do you trust him enough to play him against San Antonio? And B, aside from San Antonio, are you cool with rolling him going forward?
I mean, he's only 5K over on FanDuel, so at that price, I still trust him, even though the matchup is horrible. I mean, San Antonio is not a team that we like to pick on all that. At only 5K, I think I'm still okay rolling him out there. Obviously going forward, if he stays 5K in a better matchup, I would like him even more. But, he's going to see minutes because they're injured. Bryce Deshaun Jones is out, so he has slid right back into that spot in the rotation, in the starting rotation for them. So, yeah, I trust him for, 25 to 32 fantasy points. I don't think he's going to give you – what do you have in that first game back, like 40-something? I don't think he's going to give you that 8 – yeah, I don't think he's going to give you that 8x upside at 5K anymore. Well, I shouldn't say anymore. Against San Antonio, I don't think you see that kind of upside. But, I still think 5 to 6x is not asking too much for a guy who's going to play big minutes, probably be the starter and get a good number of shots.
Yeah, I agree with you there as well. We've always faded, San Antonio. I think, but certainly he definitely needs to be somebody that gets placed on the radar. So here's my last question for you too. Dion Waiters, setting aside the Golden State game, has gone. We're talking about bargain basement value here. You almost feel like you're turning in some food stamps here if you play Dion Waiters there. $3,700 price tag, and only needs about 20 fantasy points to get you close to 6x. Right now he actually went for 26 against Sacramento, good for 7.1x. GPP eligible? Does he bounce back, or do you still want to fade him because he had a bad game his last time out against the Golden State Warriors?
I want to fade him because he's Dion Waiters. Yeah, I understand what people are doing, trying to save some salary by going down to him, but he's just not a guy that I play. I don't like his game. I don't like he's not consistent. There's just a lot of reasons why I don't play Dion Waiters. So, I mean, if people want to go that route, I understand the thought process behind it, but you're not going to see him on any of my rosters ever.
You know what, though? Let me ask you this. If I covered up the name and his name wasn't Dion Bad Basketball IQ Waiters, and I was telling you it was Jamal Crawford, you would probably say, hey, I'm okay with Crawford because of the connotation. Would you not? Tell the truth here.
I would take Crawford because I think Crawford's a pretty decent basketball player. I do not think Dion Waiters is a good basketball player. He just chucks up shots.
He is a chucker, but so is Jamal Crawford. Yeah. The difference is
Crawford's go in a little more often.
Crawfords do go in a little more often, but honestly speaking, they are literally the same player, with the exception that Crawford has point guard handle, and he got forced into a point guard role early on in his career, which is why he bounced around, from the Chicago Bulls and, a couple of teams here and there early on in his career in the league, because people didn't know what to do with him. And he was still considered, starter quality, a caliber player because of where he was drafted and how young he was, and they started to figure out, he's a second team gunner who has enough handle to play the point, but really is not too much different from Leandro Barbosa or Lou Williams earlier on in their careers. So the only difference is Jamal Crawford has kept himself in phenomenal shape and still capable of scoring off the bench at a pretty high clip. But I don't actually think they're too dissimilar, to be honest with you. I'm with you, though. Dion Waiters, like, if you watch him, this is your problem, Benny, and I don't mean to call you out on this, but I'm just going to whatever. We'd like to air our dirty laundry on the show anyway. Is you're a basketball coach, and you see the bad basketball IQ, and it affects you, just like the whole DeMarcus Cousins launching from three. Like, he's in, like, you're going to see DeMarcus Cousins like in the 3-point contest next year. You know that, right? It's happening. So if he thinks he has enough game for the skills challenge, which
that's fine. He's, you know what? Here's the problem though. If DeMarcus Cousins is in a 3-point contest, he's got about as much chance of winning as Sacramento does with him standing at the 3-point line launching threes all day. So he can launch them all he wants. It's still not the smart thing for them to do.
I will tell you this, though. You know what he actually has done, and
I'm still not playing Dion Waiters. I don't care.
Okay. See, you can like corner Benny just a little bit. You're like, I do feel like sometimes Benny, if he had the chance to, would like virtually slap me through Google Hangouts. And it's like, he's like, you're really just trying to get on my nerves as someone who's a basketball coach. And it's true. I am guilty. So I probably would just, turn my cheek like this and accept it. Like, like we were in the 40s, and I would be like, I'm appalled at this, but anyhow, yeah.
Well, I do. I was gonna say I do come from Weehawken, and that is where Alexander Hamilton is. So dueling is in my blood in my hometown. So
you don't have to tell me that. I think I get the nice side of you because we're coworkers and hosts. Like, if we were on Twitter, there's a very good chance that we've been blocked like in November with some of the
probably
stuff
probably about the third DeMarcus Cousins argument. I would have just been like, I don't have time for this anymore.
Blocked, and then I would be like. Yep. Complaining to whoever your current co-host is, why is Benny R11 gonna block me on Twitter? It's just because DeMarcus Cousins is sinking threes like Jared Sullinger eats donuts. Doesn't mean he has to take advance. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm not an East Coast guy. What do you think? What do you guys think?
You make it seem like I block like thousands of people on Twitter on my block list. That guy just really got on my nerves that one day. So I was like, I don't have time for this. I got articles to write and things to do,
Listen, we don't have DFS stats on your block percentage, but I have a feeling you're highly efficient. That's all I'm going to say. I think there's some serious Matumbo wagging that has gone on this season. I don't know what the exact stats are, but do you have
all I know is no, Hassan Whiteside averages more blocks per game than I have in my Twitter career. So there you go.
Okay, fair enough. All right, enough messing around here. Let's go ahead and move on from the two to three. But before we get to the three, let's talk about free. Let's talk about how you can get a free 10-day subscription at rotowire.com. If you like the advice of our podcast, you're going to love the website. So get your free 10-day trial here. Just log on to rotowire.com/pod. Take advantage of all the lineup optimizers for Major League Baseball coming up, basketball, NFL, NHL, college football, soccer, golf, up to the minute depth charts, customizable league projections, and complete draft kits for all the major sports, including your upcoming fantasy baseball leagues. So go to rotowire.com/pod, take advantage of the 10-day free trial. Let them know that Josh and Benny sent you. All right, let's go ahead and send over our top picks at the small forward position here for the Thursday slate.
Yeah, I mean, if you can afford to, I think Kevin Durant and Kawhi Leonard are both guys that are cash game safe. They're both probably going to get you right around that 5x value. For Durant, that's probably going to be closer to 50 points. For Leonard, it's probably going to be closer to, right around 40. But I don't really see big upside for either one of these guys here. I don't see Durant putting up a 60, 70 fantasy point game. And I really don't see Kawhi Leonard putting up 50 or 60 against the New Orleans Pelicans based on, what they've done lately. So I think I'm going to try to save here. I do like Chandler Parsons a lot. I know he had a bad game or a subpar game last night. Being Tuesday night, if you're listening to this on Thursday. but they are going up against Sacramento. We know that, Sacramento high usage guys tend to them. Small forwards tend to do very well against them. Joe Johnson, LeBron, a bunch of the guys that they've played lately have put up some big numbers. So Parsons' exposure to, I'm hoping that, people who used him on Tuesday, I guess it would be Monday night, people who used him on Tuesday night. No, people who used him on Tuesday and got burned, hoping they kind of stay away. But I think he's probably one of the best dollar for dollar options you have. From there, I don't know. It gets a little bit dicey when you get down to the lower end. If you're looking for another cheap guy, I think guys like Harrison Barnes is in play if Iguodala's out again. Although I think that Iguodala and Steph Curry sat out so that they would be okay to play in this game. So if Iguodala plays, that probably takes Barnes off the table for me. PJ Tucker's been playing big minutes, but sometimes he produces with him, sometimes he doesn't. It would be strictly GPP if I was going to roll Tucker out there. He is just as capable of having a 45 fantasy point game as he is of having an 8 fantasy point game for you. So he could be the guy that wins it for you. He could also be the guy that tanks your roster on any given night. So he wouldn't be anywhere near my cash game rosters. And then the last guy is Luol Deng, who I like Deng. I like what he has done, but he is definitely – here's the problem with Deng. When they first came back from the All-Star break, Bosch was out with the blood clot things that he's still out with. And Wade was out also. So Deng put up like 30 real-life fantasy points in back-to-back games, like 45, 50 fantasy points his first 2 games back. And his price shot up from like 52, 5,400 up to like 6K on FanDuel. On some of the other sites, it hasn't gone up as much. But on FanDuel, where he's up to 6K right now, now that Wade's back and they added Joe Johnson into the mix, Deng has really taken a hit in his minutes and his production. So you really need like 30 plus fantasy points out of him, which is something that we haven't seen him do since those games that he was playing before Joe Johnson was added to, when Dwayne Wade was still out as well. So at 6K on FanDuel, I don't know if I like Luol Deng all that much. On some other sites where his price didn't take that big jump after those 2 big, 45, 50 point fantasy games, I think he would be in play. But over on FanDuel, I don't think I can use him at 6K right now.
Yeah, I that makes some sense to me. I see what you're saying here. So for me, I want to get exposure to Chandler Parsons, particularly if Rudy Gay's out of the lineup. And on the flip side of that, I like Omer Caspi for value there as well. Obviously, you can pay up for Durant and be in a very good spot. Kawhi Leonard is probably a player, you like this matchup against Quincy Dexter and the New Orleans Pelicans. It's probably just only cash safe because the price is near 8K, 7,900 as of the last price tag, and 40 fantasy points just gets you to 5X. So that's just really more cash than GPP eligible to see. So it really just comes down to if you can afford KD and Curry or Westbrook. It's probably going to be very tough to cram those guys and still feel solid about the rest of your lineup, at least for cash. Maybe for GPPs, you can go that route. But I think we're going to have to stay sort of safe with some of the value options that you mentioned. And for me, Parsons is a top play for me, and I'm going to draw the line at no lower than Omri Caspi. Are you with me as a Caspi bottom with Rudy Gay out?
Yeah, if Gay is out, I think Caspi is definitely somebody that I'm going to have a lot of exposure to. Partly because there's not a lot of options, and we know that with Gay out, he's going to see some extra minutes. It's not as cut and dry as it was earlier in the year. It's not like, oh, Gay's out, Caspi's going to see 40 minutes, but I think he does get an uptick, and there are sites where he's still pretty cheap. So if Gay's out, I definitely think Caspi is worth a look.
All right, fair enough. Let's go ahead and flip over to the power forward position here for Thursday and talk about what you want to do at the 4.
Yeah, I'm not paying up for Anthony Davis, which I don't think is a surprise to most people listening here. But he is going up against he is going up against San Antonio. San Antonio is not a team that we pick on, so it is a spot where I would be looking to. Draymond Green in the last game against OKC wound up with like 50 fantasy points and 2 real life points. So the fact that he can do and I'm not even saying a little bit, the fact that he can do a lot of everything on his stat line still makes him pretty interesting to me. I don't know what he's going to be priced at for this game because he is coming off of 2 pretty big games back to back, but he was down in the low $8,000 range on FanDuel. So if we're getting him at like 8,200 again in this matchup, I think I'd definitely be willing to roll him out. You got to like Dirk Nowitzki going up against Sacramento for all the reasons we talked about. High usage guys going up against Sacramento tend to outperform and put up big numbers. So Dirk is another one of the guys today. I like Mirza Teletovic. Not the greatest matchup. It's a slower pace game against Miami, but he's still really, really cheap. Been getting some decent minutes. I know they had an injury or two. They just got rid of Humphrey, so there's some more minutes opening up. So Mirza is somebody that's in play too. And then David Lee. The last two guys I want to talk about, I want your opinion on them because I like them both a little bit, but I could see it going either way. Those two guys are David Lee and Ryan Anderson. David Lee, same matchup against Sacramento. If he stops fouling and doesn't foul out of games, and he might get a few more minutes too, but he's been putting up decent numbers since coming over. Almost had double-doubles in the first two games. The first game, I think he did have a double-double. The second game, I think he finished with 9 rebounds. Yesterday he had a subpar game, but he was in a little bit of foul trouble. So, you can understand why his minutes were down a little bit in his production. But he's another guy that's dirt cheap and I think can give you some decent production. It's in a paced-up game against Sacramento, high scoring. A lot of things in his favor right now. And then Ryan Anderson. Obviously, whenever Anthony Davis is out, Ryan Anderson goes nuts. But don't you think that at this point they have to realize that they're a better team when they get Ryan Anderson on the floor a little more and that they have to figure out? Because I fully expect Brow to play in this game unless he gets hurt. I think they have back-to-back Wednesday and Thursday night. So unless he gets hurt in the Wednesday night game, like, I don't know, somebody touches him on the screen or something like that and he goes down for the year, I think Brow's going to be playing on Thursday. So if he's in, are you still willing to roll Ryan Anderson out there? And what kind of production and upside do you think he has, when Anthony Davis is playing as well?
With Anthony Davis, I think that you can cap it sort of as a cash game play because he does enough, scoring and with, a decent rebounding numbers overall to get you to that 5x range. And he comes a little bit cheaper because he's a bench player who hasn't been, terribly consistent overall on the season. So that's the approach that I'll take. I'll like him for GPP for cash games with Brow, in tandem. And then outside of that, I'll probably reserve, like 100% exposure if somehow Anthony Davis was out of that lineup. But, looks like more than likely you just have to sort of plan that they'll both be in there and don't expect too much GPP home run type of production when they're both in there together, because he's going to, we know Brow's going to be the number one option every time coming down whenever that happens. So that's my general approach on that at the power forward position. Now, I love the David Lee call. I love Mirza. Mirza was the case that we gave ourselves, and we love it. The next thing I want to talk to you here about is, do you make a case down below that at all with some of the, a little bit, sort of out there options? Like, can we talk about potentially Amari, in limited minutes, who has, just a couple $100 above minimum salary, and, we're talking about 20 fantasy points. Get you to 5.5x. So are you comfortable enough in limited minutes to still expect him to get to that range because he has the quote unquote starter tag over Hassan Whiteside?
Now, here's the way I look at it. I don't expect him to get 30 points as his upside. I think 20 to 25 is the range that you're really looking at for Amari Stoudemire. So it's not a guy who I'm going out of my way to target. But if I am filling out a roster and I want like Steph Curry and Westbrook, and I want to put some other guys in there, and I'm looking for guys to just save salary and lock in like 20 to 25 fantasy points for me, I think he can do that. So if he stays down in that like 4K, low 4K range, or even below that, if he's below 4K, I think he's okay. But he's not a guy that I think is like, oh, he's 4K, we got to play Amari Stoudemire today. Like, I'd rather have David Lee, whose price is down in that range, who I think does have the upside where he can get me a double-double and get me to 30 fantasy points. Whereas I don't think Amari Stoudemire really has that unless the game turns into a blowout and they decide to sit Whiteside and, give Amari some extra minutes. So I'd rather use David Lee if I'm choosing between those two. But if you really, really needed it to save salary in order to fit in a stud that you think you have to have, way I'd be like, you know what, I could see using him, and it makes some sense to me. But don't expect big upside out of him. I mean, on a bad game he'll get you 16 to 20 fantasy points. On a good game he's probably not getting you over 25.
I think that's fair for you to approach it in that fashion. I'll probably take a similar approach there, but I'd probably feel much better trusting David Lee in a limited role against a bad team like Sacramento over old man Amari Stoudemire, even though he is at home in a juicy matchup against Phoenix. At least we know that when going correctly, you can play with as much pace as you want against Sacramento Kings, since there's just not a lot of defense being played on their end. So tiebreaker advantage David Lee in my mind. All right, Let's go ahead and talk about the advantages you can take advantage of at the center position. But before we do that, we have to holler at the business owners over here, Benny. If you got a business and you need a website, why not do it yourself here with Wix.com? No matter what business you're in, Wix.com makes it easy to get something going for you and your site. Used by more than 75 million people worldwide, Wix.com makes it easy to get your website live today. You need to get the word out about your business. It all starts with a stunning website. So with hundreds of designer-made customizable templates to choose from, the drag and drop editor, there's no coding needed. You don't need to be a programmer or designer to create something beautiful. You can do it yourself with Wix.com. Wix.com empowers business owners to create their own professional websites each and every day. So when you're running out your own business, you're bound to be too busy to worry about the budgets, the scheduling appointments, or building a website for your business. And because you're too busy, it has to be easy, and that's where Wix.com comes in. With Wix.com, it's easy and free. Go to Wix.com to create your own website today. The results will be stunning. All right. Stunners at the center position are up. Let's talk about who you're putting down here for Thursday.
Yeah, I mean, there's really only 3 guys on my radar. DeMarcus Cousins is obviously always in play. If you got the money to afford to spend up for him, I think you can. But I don't necessarily think I want to do that here, because I think there are some options below him that can give you some big numbers for a cheaper price, where you'd kind of be giving up some value if you do go up to Cousins. Those 2 guys who I'm thinking of, the guy in the higher price range is going to be Hassan Whiteside. We saw him get back to the normal minutes. I think that one game where he only played 26 minutes, I think it had more to do with the fact that they were winning by a bunch at the end, so they kind of took him out and put in Amari. Now, if you think that's going to be the case in Phoenix, I could see that happening, but yesterday I wasn't really all that on Whiteside. It's about the way the rotation was going. But in a closer game like yesterday, where they needed to take the 5-minute mark of the first and third quarter and played the entire end of the first and third quarter, and then played the entire second and fourth quarter from start to finish. So he played like 5 minutes at the end of the first, 12 minutes in the second, 5 minutes at the end of the third, 12 minutes in the fourth. Wound up with like 34, 35 minutes. So if I'm going to get 30 to 35 minutes out of Whiteside, I love him. I'm going to put him in there. He's been scoring lately, which has always been a knock on him. He's a guy that's going to get you 12 to 15 rebounds a game if he's playing that much time. He's going to get you 3 to 5 block shots. And like I said, he's been scoring. So if he's given us 16 to 18 to 20 fantasy points to go along with the 15 boards and the 3 or 4 block shots, that's a really easy 40-plus fantasy points. So at 8K or less, I think Hassan Whiteside is somebody I'll have a lot of exposure to. And then the reason why I don't know if I can spend up so much for Cousins is we've been getting really good games out of Alex Len lately, and he's basically half the price of DeMarcus Cousins. So if you can get 30 to 35 fantasy points out of a guy like Len for half price on Cousins, you need Cousins to get you 65 to 70 fantasy points, which, yes, he can do, but I would rather take the savings on Len and then use that money to spend up at other positions where there isn't a viable, cheaper option, like the point guard spot, where I think I'm giving up a lot more by coming down from a Steph Curry or a Russell Westbrook to, like a Goran Dragic, as opposed to coming down from DeMarcus Cousins to Alex Len, who's still been putting up 30-plus fantasy points for us, and is doing it at half price. So I think the opportunity costs at other positions like point guard are bigger than they are at center. So I think you can come off of Cousins and go to guys like Whiteside and Len here. Although, again, if you have the money to spend up on Cousins, look at the numbers this guy's been putting up. You can't really argue against anybody who wants to do it if they have the money and like the way the rest of the roster is shaping up for him.
All right, I'm with you there as well. And just sort of flipping through down here at the very bottom, trying to figure out if there's anybody that has potential fantasy value. The only person I can talk about here, and I think people were sort of scared off him a little bit because he, struggled production-wise in a couple spots over the past week. But you know what? I think you can potentially get back invested in Andrew Bogut there as well. Had a down game against Oklahoma City, but take a look at the matchups. Prior to that, follows up. The Atlanta has, a legitimate center in Al Horford, who's a threat on both ends of the floor. He goes for 17 and 9 with 2, 2 and 1 for 36 fantasy points and 8x. Then in between the Oklahoma City game, he produces 5.7x against Orlando, and then back against Atlanta too, again 33 fantasy points for 7.2x. So he's actually been playing closer to 30 minutes over 3 of the past 5. So are you willing to go back to the well on Bogut, or are you going to try to stay away from that situation?
Yeah, I never really play Bogut. And the problem that I have, like I said, Alex Len is still somewhat cheap. So if I'm going to go cheap at all, I'd rather just go to a guy like Len, who I think has upside, as opposed to trying to go down for some of these, like a Steven Adams or an Andrew Bogut, and not really feeling comfortable that they're even going to definitely return me value. I think I definitely have a safe floor with Alex Len and upside with him as well. So if I'm going cheap at all, he's kind of where I draw the line on the bottom.
All right, I think that's fine and fair. I'll at least reserve some GPP exposure to Andrew Bogut because the price is tremendous. If you decide to roll, him in that faction, we're talking about $4,500 price tag. So that's if you're looking for a way to cram in KD and Curry, or Westbrook and KD, or Draymond Green, one of the two, even maybe Klay Thompson, then that's the way that you get it done, with taking a home run shot in your GPPs with somebody like Andrew Bogut to try to get your salary balanced out. So just something to keep in mind in the back of your price, your mind when you're filling out those GPP rosters. I agree with you 100% on Alex Len, and I think Hassan Whiteside also is in play. DeMarcus Cousins, having said that, at least for cash games should eat Zaza Pachulia alive, like literally, like Jurassic Park style. So that is going to be a second game of the back-to-back on the road, though. So you don't normally see the production tick downward, but I think they're going to probably struggle on the road against, maybe struggle a little bit more on the road against Memphis, maybe less so now that Marcus Gasol's out of the lineup. But going up against Dallas and having, this is likely to be a multiple game losing streak for the Sacramento Kings, may get a little bit into desperation mode, and you're probably going to see a 220 plus total in this game on the road at Dallas. So something else to consider. And that's going to wrap it up for today's show. Don't forget to check out Benny on Twitter at BennyR11. Check me out on Twitter at JoshHayesFS, and subscribe to the official Rotowire YouTube channel. Press that little red button and let us know that you enjoy the show. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.